thought it was a feature documentary. I directed. I'm like, I'm going to edit it. I'm going to do this, and it came out. It was okay. It didn't do really well at all, I would say, but it taught me not to sort of think that this is it. Like I'm, the director, and that sort of led me to the other two projects that you saw. That
which were actually
you
very good. Yeah, so
thank
I'd be
thank you.
interested to see. I'd be interested to see the bad one, see how you learned that stuff. Yeah.
uh, but one thing about time when I was watching it this morning, it was when again I had forgotten most of it. So there was a great, and this is from a script standpoint, and I don't know what version of the script that you directed, but there was a story right there when he travels back and possibly seeing himself or running into himself. There was that part that I'm like, okay, I
Mm.
wish that was explored a little bit. And this is just my
Actually,
thoughts.
there's a thing there, but I still rail against the fact that I was forced to cut it. I'd actually shot. So Alexander comes running through to try and find his girlfriend. He finds his girlfriend, his fiancée Emma, and whisks her away. And there was this lovely shot where the camera followed them as they ran up the hill towards where the coaches are, and then whip panned back to the rest of the sort of the skating rink stuff. And Alexander came running up to camera, looking around like, wait a minute, where is she? And it was an exact mimic of the shot where he came, hurrying up to camera and then sees her and then, runs into her arms that we've already seen. And this is the exact same thing, but now she's not there. And the whip pan was one of those ones where you can hide a cut in a whip pan, and it hid perfectly. I mean, I actually went through it frame by frame. Wayne Warman, the editor on the show, was superb. And he was very, very proud of this cut because you can go through frame by frame and you can't find the cut. And anyway,
Mm,
so Alexander whisks Emma away, whip pan back, Alexander comes running up, doesn't see. And Walter could not get his head around the idea that Alexander could be in two places in the same time. And I couldn't articulate to him why that made sense. And it's like, yeah, but you've seen this in Back to the Future. I mean,
I
this
was gonna
this
say that. Yeah.
this is a standard thing in time travel stories. And he
Yeah.
just said, I just can't understand how like all that DNA can be in these two places. And it's like, but that's the point about time travel. You are physically traveling. Yeah, anyway, so he made me cut it out of the show, and it still hurts because it was one little shot, but it was
Yeah, and it would have made a difference because it creates that sense of, tension a little bit. It flows the story, and I also felt, go on.
well, no, the complication that would have arisen. I mean, time travel stories are rife with complications, and the complication that would have arisen is that there's a scene immediately after Emma's repeated death, where they're in the morgue, and Philby comes and talks to Alexander, and he's kind of deep in this gloomy kind of inward vision, and then he kind of sparks the idea of making the time machine and walks out. And of course, logically, if there had been two Alexanders, then which Alexander would it have been in the morgue, and why would not the Alexander who belongs in the time have come and found his fiance's body, and so on? I mean, arguably, he didn't know that she died yet, or something like that. But that seems so. So yeah, it is actually an interesting point that that HG didn't travel into the past in his novel. He'd actually written a couple of versions of the novel before he wrote Time Machine. Back when he'd been a student at the Kensington Normal School of Science, he'd been the editor of a student magazine, and he'd written the first like 3 or 4 chapters of the Chronic Argonauts. That was it. It was called The Chronic Argonauts, and it was it was an incredibly Victorian melodrama thing. It was, you know, this old manse up on a hill, and there's the villagers all think something horrible's going on there, and it's this Professor Nebber Gipfel who is building this extraordinary machine, and you know, a couple of young people get involved in it, and they go whisking off into and even within that, there was some sort of internal loop where the destruction of the manse, this mansion on the hill, had been a result of the things that the time travelers had in fact themselves done. He abandoned that, and actually, by the way, also destroyed any copy of it he came into contact with in future years.
Right.
He then later wrote a book which was called The Universe Rigid, which I think explores the idea that there is nothing you can do to change time. You know, because fundamentally, sorry, this gets into the weeds of time travel stories.
No,
but
this is good. Good.
Fundamentally, there are two ways you can go with the time travel story. You can either say there is nothing you can do to change it, which is what we were doing with Emma dying in different ways. I mean, there was actually an even more comedic version of that script where it became kind of like what was it called, Groundhog Day, where it's just like there was a series of cuts of her dying in different ways. It's like, we can't do that. That is going to be too funny. But anyway, so you can either do a thing where it's all solid and there's nothing you can do about it, or you say, well, there's a multiverse of options, and at any point you can go off. There was actually a sequel to The Time Machine called The Time Ships, written by, oh, I ought to know this guy's name and I've forgotten. I'm so sorry. Where he explored a multiverse thing where, okay, they keep on trying to fix stuff, and they keep on going further and further into the past and screwing up the future even further. It's a very thick and very complicated book, quite clever. But anyway, so Universe Rigid appears to have been a version of the time travel story in which there was nothing you could do to change things. And HG had tried to get that published, and apparently it was unreadable. I mean, just, you could not make, you know, a single sense of a single word of it. And actually, he ended up writing the book itself really through poverty. He'd been a teacher at the he'd become a teacher at the Kensington School, and he'd then had an affair with one of his pupils, had left his wife, who was his cousin Isabel, and gone off to live with Amy Catherine Robbins. And they were living together before they were married, very modern and shocking to their landlady. And he'd been a school teacher for a while, and then he got quite ill through actually a football injury, and so the only thing he could do was write, and he wrote all kinds of magazine articles, you know, going to the beach, a trip to the dentist, anything at all you could write about, and you know, there was a strange boom in magazine publication right around sort of the 1880s. Partly because the 1860s had a government push to increase education, and so there'd been lots of money had gone into schools, and as a result, there was a very literate population that was looking for entertainment, and so all these, like the sort of Penny Dreadful magazines, started up. And so anyway, HG trotted out this time machine idea, and by this time he'd explored all the ways of doing it wrong, and so then wrote a story where it's just, I'm just going to go into the future. If I just go off into the future, and we can talk about you know, human development and the things that we understand about astrophysics and stuff like that, and not have to worry about the paradoxes of internal loops within time travel stories.
Yeah.
By the way, just a little history there. He got about halfway through. It was published as a serial, as a weekly serial, and he got about halfway through it, and then the magazine he was publishing for was bought, and the original editor who'd commissioned him was sacked, and they stopped. They just said, enough of this time travel nonsense, go away. and that was suddenly the end of that, and that would have been the end of the book completely had the editor not then been hired by another magazine and had contacted HG and said, hey, you know that time travel story, let's publish that again, that was good.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment, and do come back for another episode. Until then, have a great day.